use it. Mayor, City Council, City Manager, City Attorney. My name is Richard Viktorin. I'm presenting on the Formula One incentive study today, audits in the public interest. You flip the slide, please. Thank you. $290 million. Over 10 years, the total subsidy to Formula One from the Major Events Trust Fund will be over $250 million. $250 million will come from the state of Texas. It will be paid directly to Formula One World Championship in London, England, and at 10 annual lots of $25 million. $40 million from the city of Austin. Formula One is a sport largely for the very affluent, whose principal investors and financiers are the billionaires Red McCombs in Texas and the F1 impresario Bernie Ecclestone, once thought to be the richest man in England. I'm going to start with the controller certification letter. A little over a year ago, before anyone knew that Formula One was even coming to Austin or Texas, the Controller of Public Accounts certified that Formula One management in England would be receiving $25 million a year for 10 years for Formula One. We believe her certification was contrary to law. She issued a certification on May 10, 2010. Senator Watson's Bill 1515 states that an METF certification cannot be issued until a sponsoring city makes a request to access the Major Events Trust Fund. So as a statesman reported, we kind of have the cart before the horse. Next slide, please. The Controller's Economic and Fiscal Estimate of Formula One. The estimate was prepared by Robert Wood, manager for the Local Government Assistance Division. Notably, this estimate has been sanctioned by Dr. Don Hoyt, the consultant retained by Formula One to do the independent economic impact study upon which Council will base its decision. Dr. Hoyt managed and implemented the original Events Trust Fund program and managed it through several legislative changes since inception in 1999. I think it might be useful for a second to just look at the estimate. It's kind of tiny print up there, but basically what the controller has done is added up all of the economic activity from the event: lodging, food, beverage, alcohol, tips, entertainment, retail shopping, snacks, car rental, other, ticket sales, come a total number. Then in that midsection, she's done her economic estimate of the direct and indirect, and then the fiscal impact. In the bottom right corner, you'll see $29 million. That's where she gets the 25 that comes from the state and the 4 from Austin. Also significant on here is you'll see 130,000 fans, 75% coming from out of state, 97,000. Next slide, please. What we know about the estimate. Through open records requests, we were able to obtain the FIDA data and calculations used to produce the estimate. Notably, the estimate was produced after the controller issued her certification letter promising Bernie Ecclestone $25 million a year. We found gross error and exaggeration in the estimate. We found significant objective error in the economic estimate and the fiscal calculation. And by fiscal calculation, I mean the estimate of the tax outflow. We believe the estimate was forced, perhaps even falsified, to produce an amount sufficient to match the $25 million promised to Mr. Ecclestone. The estimate was not independently produced, but we will let you form your own conclusions. Next slide, please. So what you see on the right is the feeder data, which we did our forensic work on. The estimate assumes, for instance, that each and every out-of-state visitor, 97,500, will occupy a hotel room alone. This is true. This is the hospitality visitor. A business visitor may be 1 to a room. Hospitality is north of 2. For instance, if a family of 4 attend, they will rent 4 rooms. That's what the controller is assuming in her estimate. It's one of the things she used to puff it up. This inflated the economic estimate by $20 million and the occupancy tax revenues by $1.25 million. The controller's estimate assumes that every visitor attending F1 will pay a 10% tip on their hotel charge. This overstated the economic estimate by $4 million and the tax consequence by $250,000. This is a double error. It applies a tax which does not exist upon an economic behavior which only rarely exists, if at all. There's objective error. Throughout the calculation, the controller ascribed sales tax revenues to gratuities. Gratuities are absolutely not subject to sales tax in Texas. This overstated tax revenues from F1 by over $1 million. More objective error. Mysteriously, food, drink, shopping, entertainment, everything except lodging use a 4.5-day stay. The calculation at the top right clearly shows the average stay to be 4.5 days. This inflated the tax revenues by almost $2 million. There is another $500,000 error in tax revenues which lacks attribution. It may be a raw plug in her estimate. We believe approximately 4.7 of the combined 2.9 million tax estimate does not exist because the economic activity was exaggerated, or there was an error in its calculation, or the tax calculation was an error. Next slide, please. Error and exaggeration in the controller's estimate attendance. The estimate also very likely overstates out-of-state attendance. The whole premise of the METF incentive is the additional economic activity and resulting retail tax take from out-of-state visitors. Otherwise, it would just be Texans paying for the track. Formula One's own industry literature, there's a report there to the right, reports that England's Silverstone race attracted only 3% out of country. If Texas experiences the same result as England, it would virtually extinguish the economic activity eligible for the Major Events Trust Fund. Error attributable to the controller not properly limiting the incentive to the increase in economic activity. The Major Events Trust Fund restricts the incentive to the increase in economic activity from the event. You've heard the event's attorney, Richard Suttle, state it is only for the incremental increase, and the city's representatives from their Economic Development Department. Austin's tourism and hospitality economy is variously 60 to 70% utilized all year long. Texas and Austin already own those revenues. The most fundamental error in the controller's calculation is she awards F1 the tax bounty from the incumbent economic activity, the part of the tourism economy and hospitality economy which is already utilized and upon which we already collect taxes. Because of its size, F1 will completely displace the existing lodging economy and significant portions of the restaurant and entertainment economy. No one but F1 fans will be landing in ABIA that week. The controller's estimate is not based on the delta as the law requires. This error causes incentive to be overstated by as much as $19 million of the total $29 million. But the exact amount requires additional analysis not within the scope of this study. Academic economists who study the sports industries have never found significant impact from major sporting events. I'm not talking about from the sporting economy at large. I'm talking about the one-time sporting event. What they do is they go and look at the tax receipts from the year before for that month, the year of the event that month for the Super Bowl, and the year after. They find barely a blip. Also know that the four subject retail taxes, sales, alcohol, lodging, and car rental, which Austin already receives from approximately 65% of the economy, will now be directed to Formula One, in this case via the hosting organization, not to city revenues. If Dr. Don Hoyt's economic impact study does not estimate the displaced economic activity and produce a net number for the economic estimate and for the tax estimate, he has erred as well. The controller's estimate is not conservative, and it is not safe. Will F1 cause Austin to incur uncompensated public expense? With 97,500 out-of-state visitors, there is absolutely no circumstance under which Formula One won't cause significant additional municipal operating expense. We're already spending $13.4 on F1's water utility infrastructure. We also take issue with the fiscal note attached to the agenda item. If you will note, it says there is no unanticipated fiscal impact. A fiscal note is note required. We believe they were saying not. You know, on Monday, when asked about the accuracy of the fiscal note, Egresso's Deputy Director, Rodney Gonzalez, contradicted the posting in the language. Mr. Gonzalez stated there would, in fact, be fiscal impact, but that information was not available and would not be available until the June 23rd council meeting. You know, I guess the one thing I would say is we need to slow this down. And the enhanced process for economic development, can we flip the slide, please? And during the council work session on Tuesday, staff from the city attorney's office stated the enhanced process only applies to Chapter 380 agreements. Yet if one looks in the scoring matrix, it mentions tax increment financing districts. The Tax Increment Financing Act is in Chapter 311, not 380. Furthermore, we see no language in the adjacent ordinance which states it is restricted to Chapter 380 agreements. We believe the city should abide by the enhanced process for economic incentive proposals. Closing comments. I am scheduled to lay out the forensic analysis of the Comptroller's estimate to the City Auditor's Integrity Unit on Monday afternoon of next week. For your assurance, City staff will be verifying the problems we have found in her work. As a bit of third-party verification for the value of an F1 race to other cities in North America, our research disclosed that Indianapolis, the last U.S. location for Formula One, stopped its bidding at $10 million in 2007. Montreal and Canada, their local and provincial support is the same amount, $10 million, though the Canadian federal government does kick in another $5 million. We note the Comptroller of Public Accounts believes F1 is worth 2 to 3 times the amounts of which cities with experience say it's worth. F1 as a sport now derives more income from public coffers than it does from any other revenue source. Therefore, we believe its fundamental economics are challenged. Formula One has had a troubled history garnering consistent fan support in the United States. In terms of host cities, they have surely moved around. Dallas had a June F1 event in 1986. The event lasted 1 year. That concludes my comments. Thank you.